Okay, so section 2 is a long one. So I'm going to be referring to the book quite a bit. So what we're looking at here is the impact of language. So we're going to look at some of the ways that language impacts or can impact our lives. The first one has to do with names. Here's my question. Do you like your name? As a child, I hated mine because everyone got little license plates for their bicycles or pencils with their names on it. And if we lived in France, sure, there was a ton of Marguerite, but in the United States, no. And people used to say, why don't you just get Margaret? Well, that's not my name now, is it? So I like this first point. I think it's true. Names shape the way others think of us, the way we think of ourselves, and that can think of the way that we act also. Maybe if you happen to be named after a relative and you want to show that you are very different from this person, you might act differently. Right? So people with non-normative names that are obviously outside of the norm, can suffer psychological and emotional disturbance. I mean, I wouldn't say I suffered psychological and emotional disturbance. It was unpleasant. I just so wished my name was Victoria or Veronica. I don't like those names anymore. But if your name is really out there, I think that's changing now because there are more unusual names now. And at that point, what makes a name unusual changes over time. There was a comedian. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. He's probably before all of your time. His name was George Carlin, and he was rather profane. He used a lot of profanity, but he had a very funny little skit in his writing. I don't think he ever did perform this, where he talked about the fact that you don't hear anyone named, you don't meet anyone named Mildred or Ethel, or what did the textbook mentioned, Bertha, because those are grandma names or great grandma names. But he said, fast forward 60, 70 years, and the nursing homes are going to be filled with people named Tiffany and Amber and Crystal, which were names that did not exist, 40 years ago. Okay. Sometimes I think this is an unusual name good? Is a unique name distinctive? I think that's up to individuals, but we need to be aware that can cause problems because they're not always well viewed by society. So my daughter's name is Isata, but it's shortened to Isa, and it is spelled Aissa, and people cannot get her name right. She got an email from a professor, and it's spell checked from Isa to Swiss '*S, Swisses. People are always calling her Aisha, which is a variant, but it is not her name. So I think she has a love-hate relationship with her name. Okay, way too much about naming and identity, but one last point that has to do with the names that we opt to give our children. I went to school with a woman. There were 5 girls in the family. They were Irish Catholic, and all of them were named Mary. Mary Kathleen, Mary Christine, Mary Elizabeth. I don't remember the other ones, and they all went by their middle name. So, okay. Another way that language can impact our life is affiliation. How are we affiliated? How are we connected to other people? So we can build solidarity through speech. Maybe you have seen this. One way that we do this is we want to show people that we are similar to them. So we will adapt our speech to match their speech. That's called convergence. You maybe saw this when you were younger and your parents tried to show that they were, I'm going to use old-fashioned slang, they were hip or with it, and they used slang, but they used it wrong, or it just felt wrong to have this old person use language. Okay, I remember the first time I swore in front of my son. He was probably, 15, and he was shocked. Mom, Okay. All right. So, but we do this when we want to show people I am like you. Divergence is speaking in a way that's going to emphasize that you are different. So it might happen that maybe I'm in class and I've been a little too casual, and I'm noticing that the students are being loose with the rules, or I feel they're being disrespectful towards me. So instead of using any slang that I might happen to know, I might start speaking in ultra correct way. I will change my enunciation to be very clear. I will make sure that I do not use contractions. Okay, so that is, if you happen to notice someone doing this, they are subtly signaling to you that the two of you are different. Okay, so that's the second way that language can impact us. There is the kind of speech that we call powerful speech, and there's a kind of speech we call polite speech, sometimes called powerless speech. There is a video up in Blackboard that was a Pantene ad. It's called Sorry Not Sorry. Take a look at it. Basically what you'll see is women being tentative, being a little hesitant, being indirect, and saying sorry way too much. Okay. Other things okay. Do you use any of these? Do you say kinda, sorta, I think, I guess? Do you use these hesitations? Are you a big sayer? Do you say things like, well, I'm not sure, but those indicate that you don't feel you have any power. Powerful language would be direct, would be forceful. You would make declarations and assertions. You wouldn't say, I think we should do this. You say, we should do this. You don't say, well, maybe if we just took some time to get everybody's input. Okay, you just say, we're going to take a couple minutes to get people's input. Okay, powerful does not mean rude. Powerless does not mean polite. But there is a way to speak in a way that is polite. So in a high context culture, coming straight to the point would be very rude. So being a little more indirect would be considered polite. So, I mean, if I think about, so let's say my neighbors are having a party. When my kids were little, neighbors are having a party, and they were playing loud accordion music. They do love accordion music, and my daughter's bedroom was right on that side of the house, and she was sick, and I just gotten her down for a nap, and they're playing that loud papa kind of accordion music. Now I can go over there and I could say, I can knock on, or I could go in the backyard and say, hey, look, your music is loud, and my daughter can't sleep, and you really need to turn it down. I don't think I was terribly rude. I was being very powerful. I was making declarations and assertions. What if I say, hey guys, sounds like you're having a really good time. I know that I'm sure you don't know that Isa is not feeling well, and her bedroom is right there. Would you mind turning your music down? Okay, that way I'm a little more polite, and I think, see, there's me being tentative. I'd get a better result if I spoke that way. Okay, so this is something each person has to figure out for themselves, what they would consider to be powerful or too powerful, and are you being polite, are you being powerless, and it's also definitely culturally determined. Okay, so now we've got an impact of languages, sexist language. So, and this is tricky. Sexist language unnecessarily differentiate between males and females, or exclude, trivialize, or diminish either sex. Okay. There are those who argue that this is a form of hate speech. So there's an assessment on page 146 that asks you to assess your communication for sexist language. It starts with women who think that being called a chairman is sexist are misinterpreting the word chairman, and it asks you to say strongly agree up to strongly disagree. Okay, so I like the example they give in the textbook. The term unmarried mother is common, but we don't talk about unmarried fathers. Why not? Okay, we use the word mankind. Okay, how about humanity? So what they're saying is we can eliminate sex-specific terms, or we can use neutral terms, or we can mark the sex clearly to heighten awareness. So rather than say chairperson, we might say, people say, let's use the word chairman and chairwoman to differentiate this. The person who's chairing this committee is a man, so he's the chairman of the committee. This person who's chairing this other committee is a woman, so we'll call her a chairwoman. This is a personal decision for you, and it is also, I would say, you need to be aware of the society that you are living in. Okay, this one is obviously a huge topic now, more so than ever before. It's in the news. So racist language is language that classifies members of one group as superior and others are inferior. Okay, we in English, I don't know if it's unique to the United States. I really haven't thought about it this much. We tend to use the word black to indicate things that are negative. They talk about Black Monday, Black Plague. Black cats are evil. The black market is this shadowy way where you can buy and sell things. Okay, why? Okay, so that's something we it's an innocent use of the word black, but I would say even the brouhaha over the phrase Black Lives Matter, where sometimes people hear this, and this is not racist language, but I think I'll say it here, where some people are hearing the word only, right? If I say Black Lives Matter and people say, well, what about what they're hearing me say is only Black Lives Matter? And I think what people are trying to say is we want to add the word to the end, right? Black Lives Matter too. So, all right, that's a big discussion that we can have at some point. These next couple of slides are going to talk about how we use language either precisely or we are vague. We have ambiguous language, words that have more than one commonly accepted definition. And they use the word prego, which can also be pronounced prego. So are we talking about the spaghetti sauce? Are we talking about pregnant? We are not always aware that the language we used is ambiguous. My father talked about a memorable time that he said to a friend, he was giving them directions, you get off the highway, you'll come to a light. Right at the light, turn left. So what did the person do? They went right at the light, and then they turned left. And he meant right as exactly at. So, ambiguous language. This is my favorite, and keep this in mind for when you are doing your journals. You have something called an abstraction ladder. If you are at the top of the ladder, you are making statements that are probably true, but you have worded them in such a way that you are making a general statement rather than something that is specific. So the lower the level of abstraction, the more specific and the clearer your statement is. If we were in class, I would have each of you, I would say, we're thinking purely in terms of the weather, and I would say to you, I want you to, describe, it was a great day. Right, so everyone writes something down, and I'll just pick one person, and I'll say, okay, when I'm talking in terms of the weather, and I said it was a great day, what did you think? And the person says, oh, it was 85. And someone in the class goes, 85, that's too hot. I'm thinking it was 65, and someone says, oh, that's too cold. So we think we're being clear because we know in our own minds what we mean, but we haven't gotten to this level of specificity, which is what's very important. Okay. The next way that we use language is sometimes we use euphemisms. We don't want to use a hard word So we'll use softer words. My pet peeve, I think, is it's not a concept I like, but I will use the word die. So this past year, my father died, and I will say that. And my sister will say, we lost my father in April. And it makes it sound like, I don't know, he was hiding in the rack of clothes at Target, he was behind the couch the whole time. But that's a euphemism. We say someone passed. Okay, why do we use them? We want to soften the impact of unpleasant information. Some people, like me, are driven crazy by it, but I know that in certain situations I would use a euphemism because I would want to be kind to the person that I was talking to. Okay. Another way that we can do this is, that we are maybe not as clear as we could be, is when we use something called relative language. Think about, so I am 5'2", and when I used to work in a daycare center, I remember the kids saying, "Miss Marguerite, you are so tall." In no other situation has anyone ever said that about me. Why was I tall? Because they were all under like they're about 3 feet. So only relative to them was I tall. So the problem with this is, if you've gone to the doctors and you say, "Oh, I have this terrible pain in my arm," well, what's terrible? So the doctor might say to you, "Can you tell me about your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? We're trying to make it a little bit more measurable. I don't know why this keeps jumping up. I don't have anything else open. Okay. We're getting there. All right. Another kind of language is called evaluative language. Whenever you use the word good or bad, so I have tried very, very diligently when I'm talking about, are you a good communicator? I won't say that. I would say, are you an effective communicator? Okay, because when we use words like good and bad, we think we're just describing, but we are letting the person who's listening know what our attitude towards something is. The word stupid, well, that was a stupid idea. All right, maybe instead you'd want to say something like ineffective. Okay. So there are words like, the text has a nice chart on page 152, kind of a chart. Maybe you don't like to spend a lot of money. So are you thrifty or are you cheap? Depending on what word someone uses to describe you, you will know how they feel about you in that situation. Oh, she's just eccentric. My older sister, she's eccentric. Or is she crazy? I'm thinking she's crazy. Okay. The last one that we're going to look at, the textbook goes into a lot of detail on, so I encourage you to look at this section. So sometimes we use it statements rather than using I. For example, it's a bad idea. How about saying, I don't think this idea will work. I don't think this is a good idea. When we take I out and we put we're evading responsibility. We're deflecting responsibility. Okay? So you might not hear it in your speech, but see if you can pay attention to the times that you would use, like, it's a problem, instead of I see it as a problem. Okay? If someone says it's a problem, the answer might be to whom? Or probably to who, because a lot of people don't use whom. All right. Don't try, just do this next one. The word but cancels what comes before it. So if someone has ever said to you, I really like you, but, basically you don't even listen to the end of the sentence because you know that they don't really like you. That word but has just canceled out the first part of the sentence. I used to write, when I was giving students feedback, I would write something like, you had a great introduction, but your body needs work. And then when I learned about this but statement, I realized what I would do is something like, you have a really good introduction, period. Next sentence. If you can work on your body to make it as strong as the introduction, I'm still saying the same thing, but I've removed this word but, which is causes the listener to stop listening, in a sense. The last 3 words that we're going to look at in the language of responsibility have to do with I statements, you statements, and we statements. When you use you, you are expressing judgment of the other person. You are a slob, for example. When we use I, we are more assertive, more accurate, and less provocative. So you are a slob becomes I don't like it when you leave your dirty socks under the coffee table. Okay? All right. However, if I'm saying I too much, then it seems like it's all about me. So you want to be judicious and use we sometimes. So here's an example, made up example. My husband comes home from work and says, "Great news! I won $50,000 in the lottery and I bought a boat." And I would probably say, "You are so inconsiderate. You never think about me," etc. Okay, how about I say something like, "I am upset that you spent all the winnings on the boat. Do you remember we talked about what we would do? And you said that you would keep half, you would keep 1/3, you would get 1/3, I would get 1/3, and 1/3 would go into doing an improvement in the house." So I'm not passing judgment, I am making statements. So think about how often, especially in the heat of a moment, and we'll talk about this when we get to the last 2 chapters, especially when we're dealing with uncomfortable interactions with other people. How often do you use you? Think about when we're using you, we are pointing a finger at someone else. Okay, so I realized there was a lot going on in this section, so I want you to think about how language can positively impact interpersonal relationships and how language can negatively impact interpersonal relationships. And as always, if you have any questions, please let me know. That is the end of this section.